Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by J Sporting Goods, the Yider Insurance Group, Angler Quest Pontoons, the Forward Corporation, Primal Outdoors, Security Credit Union, Offshore Tackle, Garber Chevrolet, the West Branch Visitors Bureau, Rapid River Knife Works, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to another edition of the Outdoor Magazine radio show, right here on the Outdoor Magazine radio network on more than 30 radio stations. So glad to have you, and welcome to the month of March. March. What is it with March? If it comes in like a lamb, it'll go out like a lion, and vice versa. Isn't it nice to get this little break in the weather that we've had? Now, I know it's Michigan. We might well have more blizzards and snow, and I would be surprised if we don't. But isn't this break in those frigid single-digit below zero temps, isn't it nice? I mean, I love it. The forecast for this weekend calls for it to be a little bit colder again, but then looking long-term into next week, if you can believe such things, it's going to get warm again, in the 40s again. I personally am ready. I have not allowed myself to get spring fever until right now, when the weather turned, when we got that break in the weather. There was no sense in allowing myself to get spring fever when it was a wind chill of 20 below zero and 1.5 foot of snow on the ground outside my window. I didn't realize really how much snow we had until the other day when I had to do a little something on the pond behind the house. And you sit there in the house and you look at the pond, you look at the backyard, and you go, yeah, we got snow out there. But I actually had to walk through it, and I was shocked how much snow we had. In good old mid-Michigan, central Michigan, there was like 1.5 foot of snow there. But it's also amazing how much snow we have lost recently as well. Those first 2 days that it was high 40s, pushing 50 or whatever, and that strong, warm southwest wind, it killed a lot of snow. I mean, I look out there now, and yeah, there's snow, but not like there was. There's not enough snow for the muskrats to hide in the snow anymore. Little buggers come out now. I'm going to see them. Before, all I could see was the snow being pushed up as they burrowed underneath the snow. And the other day when I had to go out in the pond, it was just warm enough where the snow was starting to melt. So it was like walking through slush. And I got thinking about, the critters this spring. And it's not the severity of the winter in the early winter that it's a concern. It's the late winter that is a concern. And this really hit home. I was talking to my brother-in-law, Rick, the other day, and he was at his place up by Charlevoix. And he says, Mike, I've never seen this much snow in Michigan. He said, I've seen it in Colorado. I've never seen it in Michigan. So, he said the snow was up to his thighs. How can you expect a whitetail population this time of year not to thrive, but maybe even survive? Along that line, I do have Chad Stewart of the Michigan DNR joining me in the second hour. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because Chad's going to talk about, number one, Michigan moose. He just got back from the UP where he was doing some research up there. I am very interested in Michigan moose because I covered the original Moose Lift 1 and Moose Lift 2, when the DNR went to Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, and they took choppers out there. They shot nets over moose. They put them in crates, and they shipped them to Michigan. West of Marquette, Pashiki grade, they let them go there. I've covered both ends of this. I've seen both ends of this. And at the time, they told Michigan residents that we would have a moose hunt by the year 2000. They said we're going to have 1,000 moose by the year 2000, and we will have a moose hunt. Well, that's a quarter century ago. We still don't have 1,000 animals. I want to talk to Chad about why. Interesting, too, on this whole on this whole moose lift. Do you know what we traded for moose? We traded the Ontario DNR for moose. You know what we had to give up? Turkeys. We traded Michigan turkeys for Ontario moose. I think we came out on top of that one, don't you? What else? Speaking of wildlife, I did an event last week at a church, Calvary Baptist Church in Midland. Really great people, great event. And part of my talk was about wildlife and changing wildlife. And, we talked about wolves in the UP and how I believe that wolves in the UP desperately need to be hunted to put some fear into them. Number one, to control their numbers, yes, but also to instill some fear of man in those animals, to let the wolves know they're not the top thing on the food chain that man is. That's part of the problem with wolves in the UP is they have no fear of man. And I was talking about how I think we need to have a wolf hunt, and people said, well, there are wolves in the Lower Peninsula too. And I said, well, maybe a few. Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. Not going to argue that. I don't think there are the number of wolves that people try to tell me there are. But if you say there are wolves in the Lower Peninsula, and if you have seen them, I'm not going to argue with you. They also said, and you know what? We've got cougars in the Lower Peninsula too. Again, I'm not going to argue with you. I have no doubt that there are, of course, but And then they said, and you know what? And these were good people. I'm not trying to besmirch these people or impugn their character, because I really believe they believe what they told me. And they said, you know what? We have a cougar that's been running around the local golf course. Golfers saw him all summer. And the staff there at the local golf course actually cornered that cougar in one of the old abandoned buildings out there. And these people, honestly, they believed what they were telling me. And I told them, I said, I got to be honest. This sounds like an urban legend to me. Because I don't buy into these things. But I thought, okay, I have the ability to investigate this particular story because it's fresh and you have pinpointed where it happened, and you said it happened just last summer. So I called the people at that local golf course, and I actually talked to the superintendent of the course. And I said, I got a little bit of a strange question for you. I said, did you guys have a cougar? Not the two-legged kind, the four-legged kind. Did you have a four-legged cougar, mountain lion, puma hanging around the golf course last summer that people saw, and you actually eventually cornered that four-legged cougar in one of your abandoned buildings last summer? He said, no. Why do you say that? And I said, because people are telling me that happened. He said, no. He said, about 7 years ago, we did have a bear that was wandering around out there. Bear, I completely accept that. But I would be more inclined to think that Bigfoot was running around the local golf course more than I was buying into the fact that there was a cougar running around the local golf course. And again, I don't say this out of disrespect to the guys who told me this, because they believed it. I know they believed it. But we can't take such reports at face value. You've got to look into them. You've got to investigate them. And I just don't buy into the fact that people say there are as many cougars, or especially wolves, running around the Lower Peninsula as people say and would like to buy into. Maybe a few, possibly, but I just don't buy into the fact. I mean, honestly, I don't have time to tell the story about the black helicopters at a northern Michigan lake. 2 black helicopters, unmarked. They landed. Game wardens jumped out. I guess I am telling the story. Game wardens jumped out, forced everybody out. They said the lake is now closed. And out of the second helicopter, it landed, and they opened crates full of wolves and let them go. I really? Really? That's how rumors get started. That's how urban legends get started. Anyway, What's coming up? Let's see. Reservations next week. Reservations opened for our Wednesday night live at the Lumberjack Restaurant. It's not until April 23rd. But if you decide you want to get involved in that, reservations open up during Wednesday night live next Wednesday, March 5th. Who's coming up on the show this week? Thank you for asking. Dave Rose. I saw Dave at the Outdoor Rama show a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, Dave, let's get you back on the show. He said, I'd love to. We're going to talk some late season ice fishing and early spring fishing with Dave Rose. Then Tom Campbell of Woods-n-Waternews checks in our second hour. I referenced this earlier. Chad Stewart joins me to talk about Michigan whitetail and Michigan moose and more. And then in hour number 3, Al Stewart. Not Al Stewart who sang The Year of the Cat. And you got to be kind of old to even know what I'm talking about. Al Stewart, the former Michigan DNR wildlife biologist, who's now at Hillsdale College, the director of the Nimrod Society. We'll talk about that and more and getting ready for the spring turkey season. And of course, we'll wrap it all up with wild game chef extraordinaire, Dixie Dave Minar. My name is Mike Avery. This show is called Outdoor Magazine. My website is MikeAveryOutdoors.com. My email address is Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. A little slower paced show this week, but I think we've got a real good lineup of very strong guests. I'm glad you're with us. I hope you can stick around for this week's Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Alpena on WZTK 105.7 FM. You can hear us in St. Joe on WSJM 94.9 FM. And you can hear us north of the bridge in the Sioux, WKNW 1400 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Versa Skins. Just change your skin for the season you're in. Why buy a bunch of different sets of expensive hunting clothes when you can buy one good quality set that is going to take care of all of your hunting needs? You snap on and zip on an outer shell of a different camo pattern. It takes less than a minute. If you go to the website versaskins.com, or you can also find them on Amazon now. Go to amazon.com and do a search for Versa Skins brand. If you need big sizes, 4, 5, 6X, Versa Skins can take care of you. And if you are a saddle hunter, Versa Skins has just what you need. Check them out online at versaskins.com. Just change your skin for the season you're in. And we are in kind of an interesting season now because finally, at least in the southern part of the state, at least in my neck of the woods, old man winter is kind of letting go of his grasp on us. And I'm looking forward to springtime. I did not allow myself to get spring fever until the weather broke because I thought I'm just going to break my own heart. I was at the Outdoor Rama show a couple of weeks ago now from when you're hearing this show. And I ran into an old friend of mine. Not that he's old, but he's a long time friend of mine. His name is Dave Rose. Dave has been around the outdoor scene in Michigan forever. He's an avid angler. He's an outdoor writer, and he's with us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line. David, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. What's happening with you?
Well, it was nothing. I'm sitting here in the studio thinking about springtime, talking about springtime, but it was sure nice to see you again, Dave. How is your world?
Well, I appreciate, that you actually liked seeing me. That was nice.
Of course.
It was good to see you. And my world is good. My world is changing slightly. I'm still an outdoor writer. I haven't been as prolific. I had to go through a whole bunch of joint replacements. So it's been surgery, recovery. How's that? So that's been my year. I'm pretty much done guiding now. I was an inland guide for almost 30 years, and that's when the joints are, yeah. You can call me old. You said I'm not old, but I'm getting there. So I'm glad I could be old a little bit. But still hot and heavy in the outdoor world. Well,
Steve Austin, the $6 million man, has nothing over on you at this point.
No, when somebody calls me the $6 million man, that's about what insurance will have paid out when it's all said and done.
So listen, how did you get down this road, though, of having these outdoor passions? Did you grow up in a family that hunted and fished? Is that how this was all instilled in you?
Well, my dad was he loved to fish, and I'd go out fishing with my dad every once in a while when I was very young, before I was 10. Then his health got a little bad, so I never fished or hunted with him per se. But I was very heavy into the Boy Scouts, and of course we camped, we did this, and I don't know. I just remember making that transition from the toy aisle at a department store, and boom, now I'm in the fishing aisle and the hunting aisle, and it just. I don't know. It just was fascinating. It was a great way. I'm OCD, ACD. I got, blah, blah, blah. I got all sorts of initials that you can tag on me. And fishing was one of those ways I could just focus on one thing. And, just getting that next bite, or casting and not trying to cast my lure into a tree, that kind of thing. And it turned my brain into it helped me focus. We'll just put it that way.
Then how did you turn this passion, this love for the outdoors, for fishing, into a way to make a living?
Well, that passion was always there. For an example, in junior high, we had what they called a reading hour, and you weren't allowed to do homework or anything like that. You had to read. And of course, I grabbed, hunting and fishing magazines, mostly fishing magazines, and was just enthralled and, look at the pictures, look at the lures, look at the fish, and so I read fishing magazines. And then all of a sudden, I was a UPS driver for a while, and back when my joints first started going, when I was in my 20s, my niece said, "You know what? You can't really be a UPS driver anymore." And so, I'm sitting there trying to figure out what to do with my life, and I said, well, in the meantime, I'll see what I have to do to get into guiding, and maybe I'll write an article, like these articles that I've been staring at in these magazines for all these years. And the Traverse City Record Eagle accepted. That was the very first article I wrote for pay, and it was about smelt fishing on the ice of Green Lake. I remember it well, and the rest was history. Even when I was reading the magazines, I've never been a reader. I like to look at the pictures and read the captions underneath them. I was a terrible writer. When I was in high school and all that stuff, English class, I literally got E's in English at times. But I had an artsy-fartsy eye, and I could take a decent photograph. And so that's how I really got started into this writing part. Is you're one or the other. You're either the superb writer and you take terrible photos, or you take great photos and you're a terrible writer. And then over the years, all these editors that I worked with and stuff like that were my tutors. And suddenly I become an editor of different, publications and stuff like that. So, yeah, that world turned tenfold.
Well, and are we showing our age here now by even talking about becoming an outdoor writer? Outdoor writer, outdoor radio. You look at the world today: online, podcasting, social media. I think it's easier for somebody to break into this world because you have this audience already just waiting for you, but then making money on it. That's the big question now.
That is a very difficult question these days because, when things are starting to switch over to digital, we went from, what I call the hard print, an actual in-hand magazine or whatnot, and all of a sudden, that magazine has gone digital. So it didn't bother me to go digital as long as they paid me, right? If I got paid X amount for a magazine, I need the same thing to write digitally. So, but nowadays, yeah, that's a tough one because so many people are just so excited. And they're, all these videos, they're willing to do things for next to nothing. They may have their own website or their own Facebook page or whatever page. And, they're hoping to get a free spool of line or something like that from a company or whatever. They just have a passion. They're very good. Some of these videos I see, some of these, the actual, writing and all that stuff and the photography. Everyone's got a camera in their hand now.
Yeah.
When I started, you didn't even think about. I started taking a camera because I was, professionally doing it professionally. I didn't want to miss an image. But now, and these cameras on a phone, you can't get as artsy fartsy with them, but man, they take some beautiful photos at times.
Yeah, I guess the gist of this is it's if you want to be a content creator, it's easier than ever to be a content creator, whether it's writing or video or stills or whatever, because the tools are more are inexpensive, readily accessible. But you've still got to have the passion for it, I think, to be good at it. You've still got to have passion for it.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. And yeah, like I said, a lot of these people that the youth, they're just really good at what they do, and they, like you said, that passion shows through.
All right, so again, I'm taking a long way around of getting to our topic of fishing today, though. You've worked very close with the folks at Show Spain. You worked the, for years worked the Ultimate Fishing Show, worked Outdoor Rama, and we've got the big show coming up here in Grand Rapids in a few weeks. Will you be at that one, Dave?
I will. I'll be doing my dog and pony show, I call it. So basically, they hand me a microphone and I walk around and talking to this microphone just about who's coming up next and introduce people on the seminar stages and all that kind of stuff. So it's not a hard job, but I still get to work with some of the most experienced anglers and hunters in the world.
That Grand Rapids show to me is so exciting because we had Ben Nielsen of Show Span on the Outdoor Magazine show a few weeks ago, and I was telling Ben, look, I used to go to that show in Grand Rapids when it was at the old, I don't know, what was it called, Convention Center or whatever, the old Pantland Hotel. I used to go there with my dad when I was a kid, and to see what it's become today, that is just very cool.
Yeah, I guess I'm not quite as old as you.
Nobody is.
I was in my teens when I first started. I was in my teens when I started going, so it was in the same location but a different building, if that makes sense for folks that haven't been to the DeVos place. It was a downtown old building, and they've revamped it. And it's a beautiful facility now and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean it's the oldest sport fishing show in the state. I mean it's 50-some years old, and they just Showspan, the company who manages that. I mean they've been managing it forever, and John Lokes is the owner of Showspan, and his father started that show. Back in the
I didn't know that
50 years ago or so.
Wow.
Like that. Yeah,
wow.
so. I mean, it's a tradition not just for hunters and anglers to go visit, but it's a family tradition.
Well, and at that show, you're sitting there looking out the window, usually, of people standing in the Grand River fishing for steelhead. I mean, it's like a sign of spring, and we are now. I feel like we're starting to make this transition now, Dave.
Yeah. Up here in northwest corner of Michigan, where I'm at, Lower Peninsula here, in the Traverse City area, since just in the last couple of days. Sun came out. It got up to 44. Snow really packing down. The ice was getting pretty bad up here because we had so much snow. It pushes that ice down. Water seeps up through. Guys and gals were complaining, when they're walking on it and stuff like that. I mean, there was 2 feet of snow and then a foot of slush and then a layer of ice and then some more slush and another layer of ice, and it just made ice fishing really bad. And but now we start to get a melt off, or if we get a little rain and it refreezes at night, really the first 2 weeks of March are usually my favorite time to ice fish, and that's because the ice conditions get good and all that water running into the system, it's starting to oxygenate that water. The fish have had low oxygen for a month and a half, 2 months now, and the fish get active.
A little oxygen. Maybe does that runoff actually raise the water temp at all or not?
Oh, it would obviously raise it a little bit, not by much, obviously, because it's covered in all the ice, that kind of thing. But obviously where it's running in, I mean, close to shore, or if you got near a river, that water temperature is going to go up a little bit. Now, you just got to be careful. This is the time of year you don't want to be near a mouth of a river or a spring or whatever, because I know I've heard a couple rumors of on Saginaw Bay, some snowmobiles have gone through, luckily shallow water, but they were out in front of one of the river systems there, or swamp or whatever, or ditch. And, it's starting to thaw a little bit. Main ice can be really good, so you got to take precautions. You want
to be where the runoff is because that's where the fish are, but you don't want to be where the runoff is because that's where the bad ice is. Hang tight, Dave. We're talking with Dave Rose, noted outdoor writer here in the great state of Michigan. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this late season ice fishing, but also looking down the road here. And I'm not talking early season trolling so much, but I'm talking, pier fishing, surf fishing. That I can get real excited about because you don't need a boat. You wander out there, just walk out there, and you get in some good fishing. And then we'll wrap up the hour with a guy that Dave works very closely with, Tom Campbell of Woods-n-Waternews. Going into hour number 2, Chad Stewart, talking about how this late season snow affects our Michigan whitetails, our Michigan moose, and more, coming up right here on Outdoor Magazine. can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Traverse City on WTCM. That's 580 AM. You can hear us in Flint on Sports Extra 1330 WTRX. And north of the bridge in Iron Mountain, WMIQ 1450 AM. We're talking with Dave Rose, longtime outdoor writer, avid fisherman, former fishing guide. Dave, we're talking about that transition from winter time to spring. But before we get into spring, there is still lots of winter left. And you say this is really one of your favorite times to go ice fishing.
It is, like I was talking about earlier, the ice conditions improve a little bit after they melt and then refreeze at night. And then, getting more oxygen in the water from all that runoff and whatnot, and the fish are cooperating.
Locations for late season ice fishing?
Well, you can still try your main lake basins. I mean, once that water starts coming in and re-oxygenating the lake, that water spreads around, and it's really so much of it is more about oxygen levels than it is about water temp. Now, obviously, you get a 1 degree warm up in water temp, and that can make all the difference in the world. So again, we want to be near where the runoff has been coming along, in front of a river or stream or bog or something like that. But man, you got to really be careful because that's the first ice to deteriorate.
Let's also talk about shore fishing, that is pier fishing and surf fishing. You have a real passion for that too.
Oh, I do. I mean, that's how I started. Before I owned a boat or whatever. That's how I fished, and I still love to do it. I love to do it in the Great Lakes, even some of the inland lakes, and of course, if I go to the ocean or something like that, Gulf of whatever they call it now,
whatever it is,
I love to surf fish, whatever it's called this week. So yeah, I have that passion for the surf and the pier fishing.
I love surf and pier fishing because, as you say, you don't need a boat. Anybody can walk out to the surf. They can walk out on the pier. I usually think of surf fishing as Great Lakes, but you say you've done it in inland lakes as well. Yeah, I mean,
part of the natural resources. I mean, there's a natural trout and populations and stuff. A lot of these inland lakes, but the natural resources, they stock a lot of steelhead and rainbows and browns and you name it, all sorts of stuff. And if there's public access to a lake, you can surf fish on these inland lakes and have just as good of results, if not better.
You mentioned salmon and steelhead. That's usually the primary topic. I do know guys who surf fish for walleye, though, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sometimes, in the fall time or whatever, surf fishing for salmon, I end up catching, 5 really beautiful smallmouth bass even. So, I mean, these fish, they come up to shore. There's a lot of food up in the surf.
So what kind of gear do you need? You need a long rod, I know, because in talking with you in the past, you want to, at least in some cases, you want to be able to lob that, whatever bait you're throwing, lob that out there a pretty good distance.
Yeah, the longer the rod, the more distance you can get when you're casting. Also, if, let's say you've built yourself a rod holder or something like that, whether it's a stick in the mud or, it's something you built out of PVC pipe or whatever, you want to keep that line up off the water as far out as possible, because if you got a breeze coming in and you got 2-foot waves chopping in, those waves will catch your line and it'll tug your offering right back to shore. So the long rod is there for casting. You can use really light line when you're using a long rod. You can get a nice light action rod, and again, keeping that line up off the surface, up off that out of the waves.
Do you like a chop, though? Does it help, break up light levels? Does it make the fishing bite last a little longer in the morning? Do you like a chop when you're surf fishing?
Yeah, chop is really good. I've got some spots up here when I depict where I'm going to go surf fishing by the wind direction, and I want the wind coming in at me as much as possible. It doesn't have to be directly at me. Could be coming at a 45-degree angle or something like that. But that chop, I mean, like you said, we talked about oxygen. It breaks up light levels. It's got current going through there. Water temperatures change and all that kind of stuff. And so that's usually where the bite is going to be better, is on the windier side of a lake.
Do you use 3 rods now? Do you put out one, or actually 2 dead sticks now and cast a third, or do you stick with 2?
I do. I'll have 2 surf rods, and I always have another rod holder there because I'll cast, because some days the spoons or spinners will outfish the live bait, spawn bags, crawler, whatever, but sometimes it's the other way around. So it's always good to have, have a few tricks up your sleeve.
And to throw that spoon, though, to have that rod in your hand when a fish hit, that's pretty cool.
It is. Sometimes you think it's just going to rip your, rod right out of your hand, but if they're coming at you and they hit that lure, sometimes all of a sudden your line just kind of goes slack. You never really felt a hit, and all of a sudden it goes slack, and you just start reeling in like crazy, and then you can set the hook. But there's something about it. Doesn't matter how you're fishing, but when you're holding on to a fishing rod and all of a sudden you get a bite, I think that's more fun than fighting the fish. It's just that boom that gets that little pump of adrenaline going.
Real quick, retrieval speed and cadence, does that play a factor?
It can, and you really need to just you got to mess with it. Some days, you don't know maybe exactly what the water temperatures are, and maybe a little faster retrieve is going to be better to trip their trigger and make them strike. Or sometimes they want it just slow and barely wobbling, and change that cadence up as you're reeling in. Try 10 casts this way, 10 casts that way, and and just keep working with it. And watch the salooner and lunar tables too. I mean, I'm a firm believer in those. Are they spot on when the fish are in there and the weather's right? I mean, weather's always going to win out, but watch those majors and minors.
Well, that brings up another topic that maybe you and I should talk about in the future. Always a pleasure, Dave. It was good to see you. I'll look forward to seeing you in Grand Rapids, and let's get you back to talk about those tables, all right?
You got her. Yep.
All right, Dave Rose right here in the Outdoor Magazine show. Coming up after the break, Tom Campbell of Woods-n-Waternews, a guy that Dave, writes a lot of stories for. Tom Campbell of Woods-n-Waternews, and Chad Stewart in hour number 2. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Battle Creek on WBCK 95.3 FM. You can hear us in Ludington on News 97, 98, 98.7 WLDN. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Escanaba, WCHT 600 AM 93.5 FM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by the Linwood Beach Marina and Campground. Linwood Beach can be your year-round Saginaw Bay fishing destination. Right now, it's still ice fishing, but how much longer will that be? Whenever the fishable ice on Saginaw Bay goes away and folks are turning their attention to open water trolling, those ramps at Linwood Beach will be open as soon as they possibly can. Like I say, it's your year-round Saginaw Bay fishing destination. It's great people, great facilities. As it comes time to get those boats in the water, Linwood Beach can help you do that as well. LinwoodBeachMarina.com. I was mentioning in my earlier conversations with Dave Rose, who is a longtime outdoor writer, that he had done a lot of work with Tom Campbell of Woods-n-Waternews over the years. Woods-n-Waternews is, in my opinion, Michigan's premier outdoor publication. You are very familiar with it. I know you are, but one of the guys behind it is Tom Campbell, and he's with us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line. Tom, welcome back.
Thanks, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing just great. I am allowing myself now to have a little bit of spring fever. This break in the weather has allowed my brain to go that direction. How about you?
A little sunshine and a little warmth, it does that, doesn't it?
It does do that. But there's still a lot of snow out there, and you go to the northern part of the state, there's a lot of snow on the ground still.
Incredible, isn't it? Yes, it is, and I'm glad for them because they needed it, and they are using it wisely. As I was up a couple weekends ago, and wow, never seen so many snowmobilers and so many people outside. So it's great.
Yeah,
and,
it is great.
It's good for the state.
It is, and how do you at Woods-n-Waternews? How do you? You don't know what Mother Nature is going to bring us. So how do you know what stories to put in on a given month?
Sometimes it's a crap shoot, but you just kind of the odds. Like our March issue is out on the stands, and we've got a combination of both. Still some ice fishing tips in there, and we've got some open water fishing to get ready for the next couple months. So, if you just try to balance it out and a little bit of common sense and hope, and you hope.
Yeah.
But that's the best thing we can do. And like I said, we're really excited about the March issue. We've got some great stories in there pertaining to open water fishing. We even got some great pieces in there on still late ice fishing as well, not to mention steelhead and all the other accessories. So but that's kind of the plan, and we just kind of try to get that balanced, and it's worked for 40 years.
It has worked for a long time for you guys. And I'm thinking, as you're saying this, I'm thinking, well, there are only a handful of states where you could do what you have and I could do what I have. You take the Minnesotas, the Wisconsins, the Pennsylvanias, the Texas and stuff. But Michigan, really, we've got the seasons. We've got a variety of things to talk about. And we got people who love what it is that you want to talk about.
Oh, you're so right, Mike. It's exactly what makes us so great too, and I think we got a little more versatility than some of those other states you mentioned.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got to be really excited and happy with what we have here in the state of Michigan for sure.
Do you at this point? I'll rephrase. I would think at this point for you guys, it's a bigger challenge to pare down what you have to put in a magazine rather than come up with stories, right?
That's so true. That's exactly where we're at, Mike. But especially when we're looking at, the success that the 24 deer season had, trying to, there's so many hunters that deserve the credit and deserve their photos in the woods and waters that, we're trying to get them in there. And we've just come down to the solution that we're going to weed them in throughout the whole year. It's always still good reading. Everybody loves to see those big deers. But you're exactly right. Sometimes it's very hard to fit everything you want to get in an issue, and and to be honest, that's based a lot on advertising,
sure.
which is not easy today as well. So yeah, you group those things all together. But yeah, it's sure sometimes it's very difficult, and people. I appreciate their patience for getting their information in that they do send us, or their writings, that's for sure.
I don't think there's ever a slow month, but if you had a slow month, can you just knock back the number of pages a little bit and say when you get the November edition just put more pages in it?
Exactly. That's kind of the philosophy we do. But, number one goal, Mike, is always to give our readers the best publication that they can get for that month.
Sure.
So, you don't want to really cheapen one up, and so yeah, you try to keep that balance there as well, and that's what we do, and we're going to keep continuing to do as well.
Well, you've done a great job, as you say, for 40 years. Coming up now, I did not see you at Outdoor Rama. I walked by the booth. You weren't there, but you will be. You or somebody will be at the Grand Rapids show coming up.
Yeah, luckily we've been splitting those shows up, as you get our age. But yeah, Mike, we will be in Grand Rapids in a couple of weeks for sure, absolutely, at the Ultimate Sports Show. It's
a great time of year, and if folks want to stay in touch with what's going on, I would strongly recommend Woods-n-Waternews, woods-n-waternews.com, or just do a Google search for Woods-n-Waternews. Tom, keep up the good work, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. You too, Mike.
I appreciate that. We'll take a break for the top of the hour. When we come back in our second hour, Tom was talking about, the success of the 24 Michigan firearm season. Well, we're going to talk about that and much more, including Michigan moose with Chad Stewart of the Michigan DNR. He'll actually stick around for the Ask Avery segment. So Chad Stewart coming up in hour 2 of this week's Outdoor Magazine.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by J Sporting Goods, the Yider Insurance Group, Angler Quest Pontoons, the Forward Corporation, Primal Outdoors, Security Credit Union, Offshore Tackle, Garber Chevrolet, the West Branch Visitors Bureau, Rapid River Knife Works, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to hour number 2 of this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show, right here on the Outdoor Magazine radio network on more than 30 radio stations across the great state of Michigan. And so glad to have you along with us. I always say the best way to listen to the show, if you can, is on your local radio station, your local AM or FM station. your local stations, you can get your local news and weather and sports. Maybe there's even your local commercials, your local ads, your local spots, as we call them. Maybe there's a sale or something you want to take advantage of. So if you can, please listen to the show on your local radio station. Now, if you can't, if your local station doesn't carry, say, all 3 hours of the show, yes, indeed, it is a 3-hour show, or if you live in some part of our state not covered by the broadcast signal, oh no, God forbid, then I would recommend the podcast as a backup. You can hear the podcast version. And listen, the podcast is the same content as the radio show. I don't, however, upload the podcast version of the show until after the broadcast stations have aired it. But you can hear the podcast version of the Outdoor Magazine radio show on my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. It's on my Facebook page. It's on Amazon Music and Audible and Twitter, now called X, LinkedIn, Apple Music, Google Play, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, yada, yada, yada. Even on YouTube. It's an audio version of the show, but it's on YouTube as well. Regardless, though, of how you are hearing me, when you are hearing me, it does mean a lot to me. Thank you. I do appreciate it. I would not be able to do this as long as I have without your support, and it does indeed mean a lot. I was reaching out to some people a couple of weeks ago, just, kind of poking around and feeling and checking in and seeing, what was going on with some different types of folks that I stay in contact with. Did this a couple of weeks ago. And a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to Chad Stewart. And I said, hey, Chad, everybody knows Chad. He is the big game specialist for the Michigan DNR. And as a result, he spends a lot of time dealing with whitetail issues, talking about whitetail issues, getting some heat for whitetail issues, as anybody in that position in the great state of Michigan is going to do. But he said, Mike, right now, I'm getting ready to head to the UP to work on moose. That got my attention. I have been fascinated by our Michigan moose herd, for a long time now. I covered Moose Lift 1 and Moose Lift 2 when our Michigan DNR wildlife biologists went to Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, got moose, put them on a truck, shipped them back to Michigan, let them go west of Marquette, Pashiki grade. At the time, we were told there would be 1,000 moose in the UP by the year 2000. Well, that's a quarter century ago. We haven't reached that number yet. We were also told that we would hopefully have a Michigan moose hunt. But I was at the end there at Pashiki grade, crouching down behind an evergreen with a big old TV broadcast camera when they let those moose go. And if you look at the video, they let a big cow moose out of one of those crates, and she takes a few stops, and she stops. Boom. And she's looking at me because I'm hiding behind one of those evergreens. I'm just glad she decided to go around me and not trample me, stomp me into the snow. But I'm fascinated by our Michigan moose, and to get a chance to talk with Chad Stewart, who was just there doing some research, is really exciting for me. Chad, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mike. I think my legs have finally recovered from walking around in moose habitat for a week, so appreciate you having me on.
No, tell me what you were doing, what that's all about, because I find this very interesting.
Yeah, it's a fantastic project, one that I think is overdue, but we need to update and learn a little bit more about our moose. So our research team, who did a fantastic job putting together the logistics and operations of this, developed some partnerships specifically with the Keweenaw Bay Indian Community and Northern Michigan University. So we have partners into this research project where our goal this year was to get out 20 GPS collars on moose, sort of in that area between Champion and Covington, south of 41, our primary core moose range. And then we're going to supplement that 20 with, I believe the number's 40 more moose next year. So we'll have a really fantastic data set to work off of over the coming years and really update a lot of our life history metrics for moose that have been lacking in recent years.
How did you get those moose? Were there helicopter support from you guys, or how did you have to do this?
Yeah, as you can imagine, it's a pretty involved process. We contracted with a company called Hella Wild to come in and do the primary darting of those moose. It basically, the whole process starts off with having what we call spotter planes up to start identifying where moose are on the landscape and whether or not they are on private land, public land that we have access to, private land that we may have access to. And at that point, we can send in the helicopter to try to get a dart in the moose. At that point, once the moose is sedated and anesthetized, we can bring in our handling team, sometimes through the air because they are difficult to get to. But we did have some field support as well, ground support as well. And all in all, the whole project worked quite well. We were able to dart and collar 20 moose in what really amounted to about a day and a half.
Wow. Did you guys have a video crew? I would love to see this.
Yes, we have a lot of video that our staff is sort of compiling right now. Again, we just completed this work on Friday. It was really Thursday and Friday of last week. A lot of that video and stills are still being edited. So I know that there's going to be a fairly broad, I guess, media blitz of all the work that was done, both in the field, some behind the scenes work as well. So I'm sure a lot of that will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks.
So we're actually getting a little bit of a sneak peek here, Chad.
Yes, yeah, a little bit of a teaser, I guess. Is that what you call it in the business?
Teaser would work too. Hey, what were the conditions? How much snow was on the ground when you were up there?
A lot, I can tell you that. I gained a new appreciation for moose as an animal that can live in that environment. I would say 2 feet for sure in most of the area. There were parts that certainly I think were up to 3 feet. Snowshoes necessary, snowmobiles obviously necessary. Even then, we as humans struggled to get around in some of those conditions. A larger person like me is crunching through that snow, and a lot of times the snow is going up to my waist. I'm
Wow.
6 feet tall, so incredibly difficult maneuvering, which made the aerial support team all the more important so we can get to those moose quickly.
So I realize, you're kind of at the initial stages of this survey, this study. But do you have a number? What's the latest number you're putting on the Michigan moose herd?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're going to update that this year. We did a survey in January. Our UP staff led that survey up there. Obviously, a lot of the same people that analyzed that survey are also putting together this capture event. So we haven't been able to update and finalize the numbers from the survey just yet because this capture project was so intense and
Sure.
took precedent. We'll be coming out with that hopefully in the next couple weeks as we start to get clear from this capture project. In the past we've been really hovering right around about 500 moose, I think, in that core area. And of course, we know that moose are scattered outside of that core area, and those numbers we don't have a good feel for. But we're starting to think about that and try to address that as well. Again, some of our research team up there are putting cameras out really across the UP, and hopefully we'll get some better understanding of presence-absence data, and I don't know if we'll be able to turn that around into some density estimates outside the core as well, but that's certainly of interest to me.
Is it safe to say we have not yet hit that 1,000 animal mark?
I think it's really hard to say. I would probably lean towards no. But I think one of the things that we need to think of when we put out the moose number, it's really focused on that core area. And again, we know that there are moose that exist outside of that core area. We just don't know how many. So when we come out and say that there are 500 moose in the core, it's not meant to say that there are 500 moose in the UP. That's actually there actually will be more than that. So
Gotcha.
whether it hits 1,000 or not, I don't know. But I would love a more accurate count of moose across the entirety of the UP beyond just the core. It's just very difficult to get those numbers accurate when they exist in fairly low density.
I got you. We're talking with Chad Stewart of the Michigan DNR, the website michigan.gov/DNR, michigan.gov/DNR. I have to take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. When we come back, more on our Michigan moose herd, and then we'll turn our attention to whitetail. It's got to be, Chad was talking about snow depths in the UP. Imagine how it is for a whitetail to try to get through that. So we'll talk about moose and whitetail and more after the break with Chad Stewart right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Caro on two stations, WKYO 1360 AM and WIDL 92.1 FM. You can hear us in Houghton Lake and the Twister 92.1 WTWS. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Newberry, WNBY 1450 AM. Speaking of north of the bridge, this segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by the company that is responsible for making this sound. You know what it is. You want to hear it again? I like this sound. That's the sound of my Rapid River knife coming out of my pocket and locking back open. I think a Rapid River knife is just a wonderful gift idea. I had a buddy the other day said, I just bought I just bought a knife for my new grandson. And he said, I wrote this little story about it. And he said, he's too young to use it now, but he'll want it when he's older. A knife is I think it's one of the most valuable tools somebody who loves the outdoor can have. And a Rapid River knife is going to last you forever. They're guaranteed for life. You can send them back or take them back to the shop, and they'll refurbish it. They'll put a new edge on it. If you go to the website, rapidriverknifeworks.com, or stop by the showroom on US 2 just east of Rapid River, walk in there, use the promo code Avery10. That's Avery10. You'll get 10% off on your entire order. And if you go to the website now, you can sign up for their Idaho bear hunt. Like the hunting trip of a lifetime, targeting color bears. People say color phase. It's not a phase. They don't, go from one phase to another. But color phase bears in Idaho with Chris Durson of Rapid River. Again, that's at the website rapidriverknifeworks.com, rapidriverknifeworks.com. Use the promo code Avery10. Right now, we're talking about UP moose for right now, with Chad Stewart of the Michigan DNR, michigan.gov/DNR. Chad, how do you end up with moose under your direction, your purview, as well as whitetails?
That's a good question. I think they lumped all the ungulates together. So, it was deer, elk, and moose. Obviously, in a state like Michigan, deer are probably going to take 90, if not 95% of the time, to that position. Elk obviously takes we have a management plan and obviously a hunting season for elk, so that takes up a lot of time. Certainly not to the level of deer, but it's always part of the discussion every month. And then moose just tend to be a tag along and almost a rider, because we really have just been largely monitoring them. And a few of us got together recently and decided that we need to be doing a little bit more with moose beyond just doing a monitoring survey. And that's really was, I guess, some of the early discussions with that led to this project. And like I said, our research team did a fantastic job taking the ball and running with it and developing partnerships and finding others to help come to the table to get this project off the ground.
Can you manage moose at all? Is the population even big enough to do that?
I think that's one of the things that we're looking to find out through this study. I would say no right now. The moose are just kind of hanging out there, and we're not really doing any type of management at all. But we're trying to understand why our trends and the monitoring that we've done has led to basically a fairly stable population. Now it doesn't seem to be declining, certainly, but it's not growing maybe like some of the earlier biologists involved with the moose lift that you referenced were thinking it might. So trying to figure out and understand what's going on there, what survival rates are looking like, movement patterns, et cetera. I think those are all going to be incredibly informative for getting a better feel for what our moose are doing in the Upper Peninsula.
It can't be carrying capacity because obviously there's room, there's habitat for more animals, right?
Yeah, I think the habitat is there. I think there's tons of theories that are going on, right? I mean, there's other states that are certainly experiencing tick loads that are certainly impacting moose condition, and I think most of the moose that we were on had certainly parasites and ticks on them. Now, not to the level that you would expect it to be necessarily detrimental to their health, but is that the start of a trend that other states are seeing? There's certainly concerned about some warmer summers that have been occurring. I've heard certainly that the wolf impacts could be driving some of the moose dynamics. I did not see any wolf tracks where I was at in the UP. I'm thinking that snow is probably too high for them to be successful in pursuing moose, at least in that location at this time of year. But certainly there's a lot of other months as well that those discussions and concerns are probably very pronounced by various sportsmen in the UP.
What was it like to put your hands on these giant animals? I mean, I've seen them from afar. I've seen them in Ontario, and every time I come around the bend and I see one of these things, I think they're tall, they're gangly, they're so homely, they're beautiful, but I've never had my hands on one. That's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, any time you get to touch and research a live animal is sort of a special experience. Moose was a different level, though, right? I mean, just the sheer size of that animal, and again, to me, the whole new appreciation was, you're very focused on collecting data and the animal's health and the safety of the people around you when that's going on. But once the reversal drug is administered and you have a chance to sort of back away and you see that animal recover from that anesthesia, to see them walk or gallop away with relative ease in conditions that you are sweating in because you are just working so hard just to get through is just really kind of a awe-inspiring experience to see how they have evolved to survive and thrive in those conditions.
And those conditions, we're talking about primarily snow depth, right?
Snow depth, yeah, 2 feet, and like I said, in some places 3 feet, and they can move relatively without ease. I mean, it's the equivalent of you or I walking in 2 inches of snow.
Wow.
They could just move very quickly through that depth just because of their height, their weight, just really, really fascinating animal. All the knickknacks and touristy emblems and icons that people love about moose, it's warranted because they're such an incredible animal.
All right, so let's turn our attention now to another animal that we all love, whitetails. These same conditions that these moose are handling, the high snow, what about our UP whitetail herd and our northern lower whitetail herd? I was thinking the other day as I'm, walking through the snow myself, but then hearing about higher snow depths further north, that, man, our whitetail herd has got to be suffering this late winter.
Well, for example, we didn't see any deer tracks where the moose are at right now in this core area. Those deer have migrated out of that area, so just as moose have evolved to live and thrive in those really deep snow depths and those harsh conditions, the deer have evolved as well to know better than to stick around in that area. So they've migrated out. They're in their wintering yards. They're in the areas with much lower snow depths. Certainly, I'm sure have been deer that have succumbed to this winter. It's been a pretty average winter, I think, so far. But I've not heard any reports of large die-offs. But it's still early. The UP winter has a long way to go, and March and April are critical months for determining how the UP deer herd is going to come out of the winter.
Why? Why is that the case that March and April are more of a concern than, say, January?
It's because deer are starting to exhaust their fat reserves by that time. So the way I tend to use an analogy is if you've got a long trip ahead of you in a car, you fill up a tank of gas and you try to get to it at the end, and you're more likely to run out of gas close to your destination than you are when you first leave, because you are running out of resources, you are running out of time. So when an animal is basically loading up and gearing up physiologically to get through a very hard winter, it's basically that green up needs to occur very quickly, so they can start replenishing that. And if you start getting really difficult conditions, whether it's cold weather, heavy snowfalls, etc., in March and April, they just don't have the resources available to get through in many cases, especially those younger, smaller animals.
So even though we've seen some near record snowfalls in parts of the Yup and the northern lower, it's too early to get too concerned about that deer herd?
Yeah, I would say so. So much of it is the timing of the green up, and that's going to be really the most impactful, determining factor of how our deer herd comes out of this winter. It's what happens yet in March and April. Most deer are well equipped to get through even the hard months of January and February. But if March and April tend to be hard, then you're going to start to see some losses occur.
Gotcha. Well, when we talk about our whitetail herd, I mean, there are so many different directions that we could go, and you've been very generous with your time this week, Chad. So we've got some more time to talk about this. I do have to take a break here coming up in just a minute. You know how this works, though, but I got to take a break, and then you're also actually going to stick around for the entire hour, which has only happened once in the history of this entire show. And actually, Chad, the only other time it's happened was with you. You're a trendsetter. You're a one-of-a-kind guy, Chad.
It sounds like it. I guess I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, hang tight. We've got to take a break. We're talking with Chad Stewart of the DNR. Chad is responsible, or he oversees, that's too strong of a word, the areas under his purview would be whitetails, elk, and moose. How cool is that? 3 of the most beloved animals in our state, and Chad is the guy who gets to work with them. The only problem with that is, because they are so beloved and so many people take such an interest in them, especially whitetails, that I don't think Chad can win. Whatever he's going to do, he's going to have a certain significant percentage of the state that says, hey, that was a nice job. And the other folks are going to say, no, this is terrible. We absolutely hate it. And so I personally don't have the knowledge, obviously, to be the guy in Chad's shoes, but I wouldn't want to be in his shoes because I don't think you can win. Anyway, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more with Chad. By the way, the website for the Michigan DNR, michigan.gov/DNR, michigan.gov/DNR. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Sheboygan on Big Country Gold, WCBY, 1240 AM, 100.7 FM. You can hear us in Houghton Lake on 98.5 WUPS. And you can hear us north of the bridge. Let's go to Manistee, WTIQ, 1490 AM, 95.3 FM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Killer Food Plots. Boy, it's not going to be that much longer. All right, it is going to be a while yet before we're looking at putting in food plots. But it's not too early to start thinking about it, right? When you look at your hunting season from last fall, if you were able to use food plots, is there something you wish you would have done differently? Maybe different seeds, different blends, put more fertilizer out there, change the configuration of your plots, put them in new areas? Well, the folks from Killer Food Plots can help you out there. Their website is killerfoodplots.com, killerfoodplots.com. Michigan-based, family-owned company. You know I love that. If you are into food plots, I strongly recommend you check out Killer Food Plots. Again, killerfoodplots.com. We put in food plots on our lease property last year, but we are, we being me, my family, my son James, and the grandkids, we are fortunate to be able to do that, to have access to a piece of leased property and put in food plots. Not everybody's able to do that. Even though we had food plots, the people around us were baiting, and our food plots were not as productive as they could be. Deer will go to bait. And for that reason, I've always said I would like to see the DNR allow limited baiting in the Lower Peninsula. Now, Chad Stewart of the DNR is with us now on the phone line. Chad, with that aside, there is a piece of proposed legislation out there coming out of the state legislature that would allow for a bait license. Can I assume you at the DNR are not really in favor of a bait license?
I don't know if I can officially comment on any existing legislation that has to run through our legislative office, but I guess I will say, you know, we've supported the bait ban from a deer health perspective and concern about chronic wasting disease and bovine tuberculosis, and that's always been our historical approach.
Talking about CWD, and I don't want to go too far down this path because you and I have talked about this so much in the past. Still a concern, or is it something that maybe we just are going to have to live with, like deer hunters across the entire country? And forgive me for saying this, maybe not as big a deal as we had originally thought?
I would say it's both of your first comments. I think it's still a concern, and I also think it's something that we have to live with. You know, we certainly don't have a solution to chronic wasting disease. We're not under the illusion that we're going to reverse it or eliminate it from the state. I think the narrative around chronic wasting disease has changed quite a bit in recent years as the more we learn about it. I do think it has the potential to be impactful to our deer herd down the road. I think the concern is when it first comes in, there's a lot of coverage about, you know, CWD and what it can do, but the timeline is not clearly communicated. And a lot of people, I think, almost think or expect it's going to have like an EHD type level impact. It certainly does not. It certainly does not. It's I would call it glacially slow almost in terms of how it is. But there's actually some really interesting work coming out of Wisconsin, who's now been dealing with it for over 20 years. And, you know, they're finding certainly deer dying from CWD. They believe that there could be an impact down the road once, I believe, prevalence rates get to about, I think it's 29% is what they were estimating. So I do expect it to spread. I do expect more deer to become affected with it. I do expect hunters in the future to see more sick deer from CWD as this continues to increase.
You mentioned EHD. Did we probably lose more deer in Michigan last fall to EHD than we did CWD?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. EHD is a very acute disease. So it impacts deer. They die typically very quickly within a week to 2 weeks. It's not always fatal, but it largely is. And yeah, I'm sure that we've lost thousands of deer from hemorrhagic disease just last year alone. And I don't know how many deer have died from chronic wasting disease in Michigan, but certainly not that level. The difference between the two diseases is in 2 to 3 years, you will not notice that hemorrhagic disease existed in 2024 in those parts of Michigan because the herd will have recovered or at least nearly recovered. Chronic wasting disease is a slow build. So you're going to start seeing more and more sick animals on the landscape, you're going to start seeing increases in prevalence over time. Now, it's not the acute killing disease like hemorrhagic disease is, but it's a slower build, and it's really irreversible. Whereas, like I said, hemorrhagic disease, in a couple of years, you won't notice the difference that virus even went through that area.
Again, we're talking with DNR wildlife biologist Chad Stewart. The website for the DNR, michigan.gov/DNR, michigan.gov/DNR. When we come back, this week's Ask Avery question. Actually, there's a couple of them, and they both deal with deer hunting in Michigan. So I thought, why not keep Chad around? No, it's beyond the coveted third. It's the unheard of, or the almost unheard of fourth. He's going to join us for this week's Ask Avery question right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Holland on WHTC. That's 1450 AM, 99.7 FM. You can hear us in Lansing, WILS, 1320 AM. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Marquette, WDMJ, 1320 AM. The Ask Avery segment is brought to you each week by the good folks at Security Credit Union. Security Credit Union loves to work with outdoorsmen and women, and they can help you with your next outdoor adventure. Check them out online at securitycu.org. That's securitycu.org. Now, the way the Ask Avery segment works, you know this by now, but this is your chance to get involved in the content of the show. The best way to get these questions to me is to send me an email, mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com. That's mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com. It can be a question that you want me to answer directly, or something that you want me to pass along to somebody else, for example, somebody in the DNR. For example, somebody named Chad Stewart, who is the guy who is responsible for overseeing our whitetail management in Michigan. Chad, I appreciate your generosity with your time. I actually have a couple of questions for you. I know one I got to you earlier because I don't want to surprise anybody with anything. If I did not give you a heads up on this question earlier, I apologize, but here it is. It's from Henry H. He says, "Hi, Mike. I listened to your show on WPHM in Port Huron." He said, "I was lucky enough to get a couple of deer this year. I properly tagged and registered them online. Now I receive a survey in the mail from the DNR asking for all the same information." He said, "I was thinking about just blowing it off." He says, "Because I've already given them this information. I wonder, are they trying to catch me in some kind of a mistake or whatever?" So I don't know the answer to this, Chad. Why, if we have to register online, why do we come back with a paper survey?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We've gotten that quite a bit. The harvest reporting that you do online is our real-time count. We're real-time count of deer harvest. We're transitioning from our old habits, which was the survey. So we're trying to keep a couple years together where we're doing the online harvest and the survey that we've historically done to understand how those two relate between one another. The other piece that's important with the paper survey that was received is that goes out to both successful and unsuccessful hunters. So it's just a completely random draw. So yes, some hunters who are successful and report their harvest still get that paper survey. It's still important because in there's things like how many days did you hunt? So there's effort information that's associated with it. There's also some opinion type questions that are important for us as well. So they overlap a little bit, but there's a lot more information in the survey piece, the paper one that he received, that helps us kind of understand the relationship between the two surveys, as well as get more information from our hunters. And we will be reducing the number and frequency of those paper surveys in the future as our online harvest reporting becomes more established. But, with being year 3, we still wanted to get that overlap included.
All right. Second question. This is from somebody who wants to remain anonymous. They say, "This is a question for the DNR. I want to know how the metro parks can do an antlerless deer cull in February at night over bait, which is supposed to spread disease. All of the above are illegal to us hunters. Several of the bucks even antlerless at this point. However, if there's an overpopulation of deer and land adjoining, if you can't just bait to draw the deer in, but why can they? So the question is, why are metro parks allowed to use tactics and techniques to thin their deer herd out that we as hunters can't? And is it even true that they're doing this?
Yeah, no, that is allowed under our permit. So he's right, or this individual is right, that the permitted removal activities can use the assistance of bait, where obviously hunters cannot during the hunting season. The explanation behind that is, and I'll try to be brief, we tend to think of baiting as this sort of black and white issue, like if they do it, why can't I, et cetera. And, we certainly hear that for things like the independence hunt, where baiting is allowed for a couple of days and other hunters with archery equipment or firearm season cannot. In reality, there's a lot of different approaches in how bait is used individually and collectively. Removal of deer during these winter periods, what we call these winter culls, is based on removing a large number of animals in a short amount of time. And yes, baiting concentrates animals under those programs, but again, the way that those programs work is that they remove entire family units or groups of deer in a very short amount of time. It's very intensive in terms of the number of deer that are being removed. Baiting during the hunting season is generally done over longer periods to alter deer movement and behavior, to increase the opportunity to take what usually amounts to 1 or 2 deer for a hunter. So the risk is generally considered greater because of the time that bait is out for hunters and the relatively few deer that are taken at a bait site compared to those more intensive efforts.
Chad, I always appreciate your time, and this week you have been very, very generous. And I'll get out of your hair for now, but I'm going to follow up with you, especially on this moose thing, and I can't wait to see the video of what you guys did up there.
I've seen some preliminary stuff. It's going to be pretty cool. You'll love it.
All right, Chad, appreciate that. Chad Stewart, the big game specialist for the Michigan DNR, michigan.gov/DNR. For the second time in the history of this show, we spent an entire hour with one guest, and the only other time it was also with Chad Stewart. So appreciate his time. Not an easy position to be in. We'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to get ready for the springtime turkey season and more, plus Dixie Dave.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay Sporting Goods, the Yider Insurance Group, Angler Quest Pontoons, the Forward Corporation, Primal Outdoors, Security Credit Union, Offshore Tackle, Garber Chevrolet, the West Branch Visitors Bureau, Rapid River Knife Works, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Indeed, this is the big guy, Mike Avery. Thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome. Welcome to hour number 3 of this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show, the first show for the month of March. Boy, it's, it has been more of a good old-fashioned Michigan winter, right? An average, and what used to be a normal winter. A lot of snow, cold, went on for a while. But I've been so spoiled the last several years that it feels like it was, felt like it was never going to end. Now, I realize if you're listening in the UP or the Northern Lower, you look out your window and go, holy cow, Avery, what are you talking about? We still got feet of snow on the ground. Yeah. But down here where I live, we had a few days there that got so warm, that strong, warm southwest breeze. I mean, it really cut a lot of snow. We went from having a foot and a half in our backyard to you can see green grass now. So I admit, it does have me thinking. It's got me thinking towards springtime. And one of the things when I think about springtime is turkey season. I love to turkey hunt. It's one of my favorite things to do in the world. When I think about turkey hunting, I think about a lot of things, but I think about certain people too. Al Stewart is one of those guys I think about. Al, for many years, was in the Michigan DNR as their upland game bird specialist. And during that time, he really became known across the country as an expert in that area, turkey hunting, upland game bird hunting. And he's been honored by just many awards at the state level and the national level over those years. And then Al retired. And he didn't do a very good job of retirement. Al failed at retirement. He flunked retirement. And he ended up at Hillsdale College in Michigan in a very unique position as the director of their Nimrod Society. Now, I will be honest. I used to think of the term Nimrod as a negative connotation. But when you go back to the Bible, Nimrod is actually he's a hunter. And how cool is that to be a lifelong hunter and then to be named as the director of a hunting-related organization? Well, Al's with us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line to talk about that and much more. Al, welcome back. How have you been?
Hey, I've been good. Thanks for the kind words, Mike. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and particularly to talk about turkeys.
Well, turkeys and more. I also want to talk about this Nimrod Society, Hillsdale, and our challenge of promoting and encouraging and protecting the role of hunting in today's world. Al, you guys are, man, you're at the spear of the point there on this one.
Oh, for sure. And, Hillsdale College is the place to make it happen. They have a strong association with the Second Amendment and the Constitution, and they truly believe in that to the point that at Hillsdale College is the shooting facility there, the Halter Educational Shooting Facility that is a home of USA Shooting. The people who go on in part of the Olympics. So, they've built a range there, a facility that is at the Olympic level, and when you saw the people winning the gold medals in shotgun in the recent Olympics, those people, in order to get to that point, had to qualify at Hillsdale and another range in the Southwest. But that's where the qualifying meets were held. So, just think about that. Right here in Michigan, people had to qualify to shoot in the Olympics, and Hillsdale was the location. So it's fun to be loosely associated with that. And, the message is that, the Olympics are, where we represent our country at the world level. And we're able to do that, through shooting, which is, the next step over to hunting.
It's a very cool relationship. And then you take it over to the Nimrod Society. Tell me more about that, Al.
Well, I'm the director of Nimrod Education Center there at the college, and like you said, one of my jobs is to help share this message, help tell people who pays for conservation, and that's hunters, anglers, and shooters. It's a lot like what you were associated with before, and in fact, it's almost on that same level, as the Wildlife Council. In fact, a part of my job is to try to help establish wildlife councils like Michigan has, like Colorado has in other states. So, kind of working in that direction too. And then in addition to that, it's to help inform, our students about the hunting, fishing, shooting. And so students at Hillsdale are really highly motivated students. Loosely think of almost every student that's there is the valedictorian of their class, so they're pretty high level students, and they're also when you start looking at where they're placed after graduation, they become the leaders of this country in many different fields. So part of what I have is called the Drummond Fellows or Drummond Fellowship, which is sort of a scholarship part of a fellowship, and I have 12 students. I had 4 and we moved it to 12. And then these students, they don't have to hunt or fish. They have to have an interest in hunting and fishing. But then they do end up buying a hunting and fishing license in order to qualify for this fellowship. And then they learn about, Pittman Robinson, Dingle Johnson, these ways that we fund conservation, both fish and wildlife in this country. They learn about the North American conservation model, and they're able then to share that in their networks with other people about, again, who pays for conservation and how that's done. So it's like having although Hillsdale College is primarily an undergrad type program, it's like having 12 graduate students, because they're really sharp, they're really motivated, and so we get to go out in the field and learn some of this. We take them fishing in some cases, we take them hunting in some cases, so they learn firsthand what it's all about. They learned how to tie a fly, but their main thrust then is to know about who pays for conservation, and then again share that with other people. And then I'm trying to do that through different interviews with people, both radio, TV, interacting with other organizations that are like-minded in trying to share this message. Again, similar to the wildlife councils here in Michigan. So there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of things behind the scenes that are in the works. We've recently produced a video that talks about the program, the fellows, and the importance of conservation. There's a newsletter that goes out about the Nimrod program, and we're right now have just upgraded the shooting facility at Hillsdale. The shotgun part is ranked as one of the top 5 ranges in the world.
Wow. And
we have just now, working with Olympic level folks, we're in the process of building this building that's indoor, outdoor, rifle, pistol, and rifle, pistol, and archery. And that will be named the Nimrod Complex. And
how cool is that?
Yeah, it's great. Like I said, when Hillsdale does something, they do it right. And so this is, again, working with Olympic people to get this range up to Olympic level, and it will be a training facility for people who want to shoot air rifle, air pistol, archery at Olympic level, or train, or just learn, period. If you've never done it before, here's a place to do it with really highly skilled instructors. So, Hillsdale has some other cool things like Ladies for Liberty, women who have never shot before, who come in and they learn how to shoot a shotgun, a pistol, archery, and they do that during the day. And then at night, there are lectures from our great professors on, say, the Second Amendment, or things that people should be knowing, should know about. So it's and then that was so successful. Some of the ladies who had never shot before came home and told their spouses, gee, I got to do this, and I got to do this. This was really kind of fun, and the husband said, well, gee, I didn't think I could do that. So we also have Couples for Liberty.
Al, hang tight. We got to take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. We're talking with Al Stewart, who is the director of the Nimrod Education Center at Hillsdale. Website for Hillsdale is hillsdale.edu, hillsdale.edu. I'm very interested in this whole relationship between Nimrod Education Center, the Michigan Wildlife Council. Will there be others coming up? We'll find about that, more about that, and we'll talk a little turkey hunting after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Port Huron, WPHM 1380 AM. You can hear us in Tawas, WIOS 1480 AM and 106.9 FM. You can also hear us in Manistee, WMLQ 97.7. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Reader Landscaping. Our friends from Reader are back, you know. It's time. I got the contract from Reader the other day saying, okay, here's what we want to do for you guys. Do you agree? If so, initial. I haven't initialed yet, but I'm going to. Because what they're going to do is they're going to take care of the lawn. They're going to take care of the trees. They're not going to mow, okay? I'm going to mow because I like the exercise of mowing. But they're going to fertilize it. They're going to thatch it. They're going to trim the trees. They're going to spray, all that good stuff. Reader can take care of your lawn and property because it's your nature and our nurture. Let them create an outdoor getaway in your backyard as they have for us. We don't have any big projects planned with Reader this summer. I think we got most of them done. But if you have a project you'd like to get done, now is the time to get on the schedule. Check them out online at readerlandscaping.com. That's readerlandscaping.com. Don't wait till the last minute when they get all jammed up. readerlandscaping.com. Right now we're talking with Al Stewart. Al is the director of the Nimrod Education Center at Hillsdale College, hillsdale.edu. Al, I find the relationship between your group and the Wildlife Councils interesting. I also work with the Michigan Wildlife Council. I think they're doing a great job. You said there are some things behind the scenes in the works. Are there other state education councils in the works? Wildlife councils in the works?
Well, they're working with different directors and different places. It's kind of fluid, I guess. Nothing's been nailed down quite yet. Still using Michigan as, an example, and Colorado as an example of, those wildlife councils and, their message and how they can help state agencies, again, share that message. It's not to make everybody a hunter or an angler, but it's to inform people about, how consumptive activities, how hunters and anglers do pay for conservation and have for, years and years, and, have moved the species, from species of scarcity to animals of abundance. A turkey's the prime example of where they were extirpated from the state, and through hunters' activities and dollars, we now have lots of turkeys, and so that's the message trying to get out, and it's just to make sure people are informed about how conservation is financed, and that's a really important message, and that the North American conservation model is unique to the United States, but it is what again has shifted the dial from species of scarcity to animal abundance, and the species that we hunt today are really the unendangered species. They were on the brink, but now because of the wildlife management activities that were done for them, or fisheries activities that's done for them, they have now made this great comeback. Today in Michigan we think of, say, like the grayling or the sturgeon, and on the state side of it, there's many partners, but there are funds from anglers that help support those programs and help support the fisheries biologists or the conservation officer who protects our resources. So that's all happens through dollars that are primarily generated through someone purchasing a hunting or a fishing license, or shooting a shotgun shell. I mean, there's different ways that Pittman Robinson, Dingell Johnson are funded, but that money then comes back to the states to do the activities that we all cherish, and most people don't really know how that's done.
Well, yeah, and did you ever think when you were a kid coming up that you would have to have groups like yours or the Michigan Wildlife Council to get that message out there? Did you think there would be such a disconnect between the bulk of society and what we as hunters and anglers and shooters and trappers do?
Oh no, yeah, I mean, like when you and I first kind of kick these things off, Well, number one, I probably didn't even think about it that much. Mine was put a worm on a hook, throw it out there, and maybe try to catch a bluegill, or gosh, I have to be 14 before I can go deer hunting. But at 12, I could hunt a pheasant or a rabbit, and prior to that, I'm just the dog for these other guys, So,
Yep.
So that's, I didn't think about it. I didn't know about it. Actually, I didn't really know a lot about it till I went to college and studied wildlife management, to be honest with you. It's a story that's so important, but very seldom told in a fashion that people recognize or understand. We say, hey, I paid my state taxes and by God, I'm managing wildlife. No, that's not how wildlife is managed. That's in essence not how these things happen. It's really happening because of hunters and anglers, and these great programs that were put into place back in the 30s. Because prior to that, we were seeing these huge declines in wildlife, in fisheries.
Well, how did we lose our Michigan our Michigan turkey population in the first place? Because they are native birds, right? They were here.
Oh yeah. But, prior to European settlement, there were about 90,000 birds in the state. Interesting enough, all south of the line from Bay City to Muskegon, in that whole area. So there must have been a batch of them, down here at that point. But yeah, there were no conservation officers. There were no rules. You could shoot a turkey anytime you wanted to shoot a turkey. And when European settlers came over, when people were developing this land, being here, there was no grocery store where you could just go in and buy food. So you bought food from some other, sort of a butcher guy or whatever. And the market hunters were truly market hunting, not hunters necessarily. It'd be like your butcher today. And so, you bought these animals like you'd shoot a turkey here in Michigan and it would be sold in Chicago for $2.50 back in, 1880s. So, and then prior to that, it was, a turkey's a lot of really good meat, so, people hunted them. And so there were several things. One was, they were kind of taken for the market, but, habitat really got destroyed, manipulated for where turkeys were. We had just a lot of a variety of things happening as we developed this state.
How then can today, the birds back then were all south of this. They were down in the southern part of the state. How can we have birds across the entire state today? Is it a different strain of bird or what?
No. Things change, habitat change. We harvested off all the, all the major pines in the state. We slicked off most of the UP. Back, prior to 1900, and that all just changed the landscape significantly. We came in and cleared the forest, and put farms in. That was, kind of homestead Michigan type of thing. So it's just, as civilization moves across the country, as we developed the country, we had impacts on it. And those were some of the impacts that we had.
I feel like turkeys today can live everywhere, though. You see them in the deep, big, old woods. You see them in the open fields. You see them in farmlands. They're pretty adaptable critter, aren't they?
Oh, they're very adaptable. Just like deer, they're very adaptable. And that's kind of those lessons learned. It wasn't just Michigan that had this great decline of turkeys. I mean, it kind of started on the East Coast, and as people moved west, the same thing happened. So turkeys were diminished all along through there, and there were, in the end, kind of two populations of wild birds left, sort of in the Ozarks and the Adirondack, or in the sort of the Appalachian kind of areas. And when I first started learning about turkeys, it was thought that you had to have 10,000 acres of great big oak trees that 3 men could put their arms around, that kind of diameter
Wow,
of
yeah.
tree. And, now we've learned, they really did survive in prairies and grasslands and this mix of openings and various forests. And I think really the reason that conclusion was made was because that was the only place that wild turkeys were, and people could take them anytime they wanted to. So in a 10,000 acre great big forest, you couldn't get all of them,
Mm-hmm.
And again, there were no rules. You could just take them whenever you wanted to take them. And so I think that's where that came from, and then we started to move birds around, through restoration activities, trapping wild birds. The biologist in Missouri, who was one of the top turkey biologists in the country, he was, the turkeys were in the southern part of Missouri, in the Ozark kind of mountainy areas out there. And there was a move to move turkeys to the north end of Missouri around Kirksville and up that way that was more agricultural. And he was not really very favorable of that. He kind of thought it was a waste. But in the end, he put some birds up there, and it turned out that mix of forest and farmland was the, prime turkey stuff.
Yeah,
and around Kirkland, that had the highest populations of turkeys in Missouri. So that kind of started off. Then there were birds, that went to Iowa to help establish populations. And that's what we looked at in Michigan when we were trying to do the restoration work is, where is someplace similar to Michigan that has good numbers of turkeys? And Iowa was the place. And we brought biologists here to Michigan. They flew over southern Michigan and said, wow, you've got some really good habitat.
Hang tight, Al. Listen, I want to follow up on this. Can I offer you the coveted third segment? Stick around a little bit.
Oh, sure. I'll stay in.
All right. So we'll take a break here. When we come back, the coveted third. This, I'll tell you what. Some people are going to say, Avery, you've been lazy this show because I did the entire second hour with Chad Stewart, and now another Stewart gets the coveted third in hour number 3, Al Stewart. No. Well, maybe I am being a little bit lazy, but I'm enjoying the conversations right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Muskegon on WKBZ. That's 1090 AM. You can hear us in Sandusky on WMIC, 660 AM, 95.3 FM. And you can hear us in Saginaw, WSGW, 790 AM, 100.5 FM. I am in the studios of WSGW right now. The first 2 hours of the show, Jonathan Dent was in here with me. Third hour of the show, Charlie Rood's here with me. So the people who would normally be waiting in the parking lot for Charlie, chanting, Charlie, Charlie. Charlie, you threw him a curveball. They did not know. They didn't know you were going to be here. So as a result, it's a nice warm day, and there's nobody out there. I do appreciate Jonathan Dent. I do appreciate Charlie Rood, and I appreciate my partnership with the folks here at WSGW for allowing me to use their studios here now for more than 20 years. 20 years. Pretty cool. Also pretty cool that right now we're talking with Al Stewart, who is the director of the Nimrod Education Center at Hillsdale University, hillsdale.edu. Al, let's keep our turkey hunting tactics discussion to a future conversation because I'm enjoying kind of the history and getting a perspective on our birds. So they were Missouri birds. You say, how did we get them here? What was the impetus here, and how did that process even work?
Yeah, we ended up looking at southern Michigan too as a place for some birds, and we brought in turkey authorities from around the country, and they flew over southern Michigan, and they said this looks great, and this was based off of some of the work that was going on. Like I said, Missouri was, one of the last states to have remnant populations of wild turkeys, and they began a restoration activity, and then they gave some birds to Iowa. And when you think about Iowa, you don't think about a place where you might find a lot of turkeys, but actually, in their restoration activities, things started to really go on. So in the early 80s, we brought these people here, looked at, southern Michigan, and they said, hey, you've got some of the greatest potential of any state in the country. So we started that, and we worked with Missouri and Iowa. Missouri was looking to reestablish or restore rough grouse. So we trapped some rough grouse from Michigan and traded those to Missouri for some turkeys. And then Iowa was looking for some some prairie chickens. And so we sent some folks from Michigan to Kansas to catch prairie chickens to then trade to Iowa for some wild turkeys. So it was a real horse trading times. And because of that, we got these birds, and we were able to establish birds then throughout the state. And, so just think about this, Mike, is within your lifetime, within my lifetime, we went from no turkeys in Michigan to being one of the top states in the country for wild turkey harvest. That really says a lot about, how the state kind of planned where they wanted to be, what they wanted to do, and then accomplished it.
I think about that all the time. When I was a kid growing up, there were no turkeys. It wasn't something we did. And now look at what springtime turkey and fall, look at what turkey hunting has evolved into. I
mean, I think, turkey hunting generally, of the hunting in Michigan, is sort of the rival of deer hunting.
Yeah.
We'll never exceed that deer hunting enthusiasm, but number two in both participation and interest really is turkey hunting.
Let me ask you real quick, Al, before I gotta let you go. There is some concern now with turkey numbers on the decline. And it's not just here in Michigan. I think it's across the country. Do you guys have a handle on what that is, and should we be concerned, or are you concerned?
I'm not concerned, but certainly, when I worked for the Michigan DNR, I was on some of the national turkey, working groups of other biologists, and we were noticing this. And I'm proud to say Michigan took the lead in saying, all right, let's develop a consortium of these states and try to coordinate our research efforts to evaluate what's going on. And I think some aspects of this are, when you put a new species into good habitat, you could expect to have, really good increases, kind of going up every year is better than the next year. And then at some point, there's this plateau where, just flattens out a little bit. And then you see some little peaks and valleys. But so that's what we're looking at. But what I am really excited about is, because of that, all of a sudden the states are doing research on turkeys again. And that's really cool. That's really cool. And I think we'll learn a whole lot more with the new technologies that we have with these, different satellite type telemeters that you can put on birds to monitor what's going on and what they're doing. Yeah.
Al, that's a topic for a future conversation. And the next time, next time you and I talk, let's actually talk a little turkey. Let's talk a little turkey hunting tactics next time around, if you don't mind.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, that's my favorite thing, just like you, I know.
There we go. All right, Al Stewart, always appreciate your time. Al Stewart, the director of the Nimrod Education Center at Hillsdale College. The website for Hillsdale, hillsdale.edu, hillsdale.edu. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap it all up with wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Minar. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the Outdoor Magazine radio show this weekend, or if you're listening to the podcast version this week. Do certainly appreciate it. Also appreciate the fact that wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Minar takes time out from his week every week to talk with me. I mean, even when he was like in the parking lot of ER, having a heart attack, he agreed to join us. Well, he's joining us this week. And Dave, I trust this week everything's good. You're all healthy?
Yep. No problem. How about yourself?
No, I'm good. I'm doing good.
Good.
I always tell that story. I'm like, Dixie Dave is so dedicated that, and I tell the story and people are like, oh, he's crazy. Yeah, you might be a little crazy too.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you got for us this week, David?
In your world? How's things in your world?
You know what? It's good. Actually, I can feel, as the weather down here has broken a little bit and we saw some sunshine and a lot of the snow has melted, I can feel a little case of spring fever coming on. And I'm ready. How about you?
Me too. Yep. I like this weather. It's warming up a little bit too. So
nice.
Well, we have is venison Salisbury steak today, and it's time to start using up some of the burger if you haven't been already from your deer. So you need about 1.5
What page is this, Dave? What page is this?
115.
115. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. I should have said it. 1.5 to 2 pounds of ground venison, and it's going to be about 7 to 8 ounces each, and this could be anywhere from 4 on up portions. You need 1 medium diced onion, actually pretty fine you want it, 2 to 3 beaten up eggs very well, a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, a cup of breadcrumbs, a 1/2 teaspoon of basil and oregano mixed, and a couple of 2 or 3 garlic cloves diced up real fine. So you're going to take and mix all the ingredients in a large mixing bowl and form them into equal-sized oblong patties. In a large saute pan, you want to brown the meat on both sides. So it's got egg in it, so it's going to go pretty fast. So you have to kind of keep an eye on what you're doing. And you want to place the steaks in an oven-proof baking dish, and you're going to take in the same saute pan. You're going to get 3/4 cup of a nice red wine, a lot of ground black pepper, 2 to 3 onions sliced in, cut in half, and then sliced thin. A couple of cups. If you're going to use jars of beef gravy, that would be easy to use. But if you want to make your own sauce, you can have a couple of cups of water, 2 to 3 teaspoons of better than bouillon base, and roux or cornstarch. So, but I at home, you're probably going to just use jars of beef gravy. In the same saute pan, lightly brown the onions, add the red wine, bring to a boil. And if you're going to be using bouillon, you can add the better than bouillon. You can add that, thicken it up with a roux or a cornstarch, and start with a small amount of either one that you're going to use, so you don't want to over thicken it. And stir with a wire whisk until all the lumps have disappeared. And if you're using the beef gravy, you're just going to omit that. You can add the spices and taste for the correct flavor. Pour the sauce over the patties and bake uncovered, 350 degrees in the oven at least an hour. And you could serve this with mashed potatoes or buttered noodles, would go really good. And you got enough gravy, you could add the top off the side dish there, which is good. It's a great dish. We did this for the TV show too. I remember it.
I remember that as well, Dave. I hear this term, and I pretty much know what it is. But what is a roux, and why do you use it? What's it for?
Okay, it's a thickening. Cornstarch has a nice shiny appearance to it, and a roux just adds more to the flavor to me. You take either oil or melted butter and some flour, whisk it together, and then slowly add it to the liquid and whisking it in all the time, and it's a great thickener. But you have to be careful you have to cook a roux about 15 minutes or 20 minutes, which is going to do just fine because you're going to bake this to get rid of that pasty flavor from the flour. It's just the way the Europeans did it.
So is it for eye appeal, or is it actually for taste?
Kind of both. Yep. because a roux doesn't have that shiny sheen to it, like cornstarch would have.
Gotcha.
So it's a little more drab and a little more flavorful.
I hear you talking often, about your style of cooking and the fact that you got it from your grandma and her European roots. I mean, you still draw on that, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely, Michael. Boy, I thank Grandma Minar there for taking me underneath her wing and showing me everything that she knew when I was a kid at her wood-fired stove.
And look where you are today, buddy.
Right. I'm using gas nowadays.
You cook it with gas.
Right.
All right, David, have a good week. We'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks a lot. Everybody be safe and sane, especially with the ice going out.
Safe and sane. Great advice from wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Minar. By the way, Dave is back in the kitchen. You can find him in Standish at the King's Dish every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. My name is Mike Avery. This show is called Outdoor Magazine. My website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. My email address is mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. Appreciate you being along with us this week. Love to hear from you. Send me that email to mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, questions for the Ask Avery segment, and more. And we'll talk to you next time right here on Outdoor Magazine.